Hi there, I'm Andy and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about the price of Bitcoin, or more specifically, to what degree it's possible to predict the price of Bitcoin, for example, in the next crypto bull run, or going into the future, or is it possible to predict when Bitcoin may hit certain price point, let's say $1 million. So for example, in the last crypto bull run in 2021, it was widely expected that Bitcoin will reach around $300,000. Some people were saying it will go even higher than that, but 300,000 was the number that was very often mentioned by a lot of influencers. And the problem is that if you don't know how to assess the price of Bitcoin or whether the price is already going a bit too high, it's really difficult then to verify those claims. You just basically take them at the face value, assume that what someone is saying, because, well, they have more experience in this space, must be true, or at least there is a good chance that they are right. Of course, in the last crypto bull run, Bitcoin never reached 300K. It never even reached 100K. It topped out just below 70. So what can we expect will happen in the next crypto bull run? To what degree we can actually predict it? Well, luckily there is a tool that does pretty good job at predicting the future price of Bitcoin. Of course, as all tools and models of this type, it works really, really well until it doesn't. So just because it worked so far, it doesn't mean that it will work forever. But it's the best thing we can use at the moment, and it's the closest estimation we can get in terms of what the price of Bitcoin may be at various points in the future. This tool has two different names, or probably even more than that. There are different websites, different people use different versions of this tool. You can find it on blockchaincenter.net as Bitcoin Rainbow Chart. It's also very often mentioned by Benjamin Cowen from Into the Cryptoverse, and he's using the term logarithmic regression bands. There are a few different versions of this model which may vary slightly, but the main principle remains the same. Personally, I like Bitcoin Rainbow Chart for two reasons. First of all, it doesn't sound quite as scary as logarithmic regression bands. And second, well, you can actually use this tool for free. Ben Cowen has a lot of great tools in his subscription Into the Cryptoverse, but well, then you have to pay for those tools. Of course, you get much more than just this chart, but yeah, there is a price attached to it. Here you can use this tool for free, and essentially it will give you the same information. And it's a nice and easy tool to use. It's pretty self-explanatory. I won't be getting into the origins of this chart, but if you want, you can click here and find the full story behind it, how someone came up with this whole idea. But the important part is how it works. So you have this rainbow, and then you have price of Bitcoin mapped over those different bands. It's a logarithmic scale. So if you look at the numbers on the right, you can see that, well, they start going up, not in linear, but in a logarithmic progression. So basically, even though it says 100,000 here, actually the top of the scale is much, much higher than that. It's like 500,000, right? Basically, the higher up you go in this scale, the quicker the numbers go up. But the important part is how Bitcoin's price behaved in the past. And as you can see, it never really goes out of those bands. There were a couple of moments, like there's this tiny little peak here when it went just above the red band in 2013. I think it went just below the blue one here in 2015 once or twice. But as you can see, it's barely visible. It's so far in 13 or so years of Bitcoin's history, it's been safe to assume that the price of Bitcoin will remain within those bands. And also what's important to notice is that as the time goes by, it's less and less likely to hit the limits of those bands. So as you can see in the first bull run, the first one ever, it touched or almost touched the top of the red band a couple of times. And then also it touched or almost touched the bottom of the blue band a few times. Then after that, after the first halving, it actually went slightly out of red band, but only once. And then it stayed in the blue band for quite a bit. That was really long, really painful crypto bear market. But then in 2017, it didn't reach the top of the red band. And also when it crashed, it didn't really go into blue. It stayed in this sort of greenish blue band right here. And even during the COVID crash, it barely touched the blue band or barely went into the blue band. And then in the last bull run in 2021, as you can see, it went into this sort of light red territory for quite a while. Then at the actual market cycle peak, it barely touched that. And we'll actually talk about this because this is something really important. And then when it crashed, when it went down to around 15K not that long ago, it was, again, barely in that blue territory, but for the most part, it's staying in this greenish blue one. So if you look at it, you can see that it's less and less likely that we will hit those extremes, this red or blue band. So it would be safe to assume that in the next crypto bull run, or maybe not safe, but reasonable to assume, the price may go up to somewhere within that orange band, I would say, maybe even just light orange, but I would expect probably in the orange band. And then when it crashes, it will probably just go to green or maybe a little bit into this greenish blue one. And then in yet another cycle, it will probably move even less. So eventually it will be just oscillating in that yellow band or just outside of that. And the yellow band, as you can see from this color code here, is, well, here it's described as HODL, but that's also very often described as Bitcoin's fair value price. So this is what you would expect at a particular point in time to be, well, kind of reasonable price for Bitcoin. As you go into those orange and red bands, it means that we are in some sort of a bull market. So orange bands, well, that's when you should start thinking about selling. And once you hit red ones, that's most definitely when you should sell. And then if we are in the green or blue ones, well, that's the time when you should be buying Bitcoin. That means that for the last few months, we've been firmly into this buy territory. So you should be just accumulating Bitcoin and waiting until it reaches at least those orange bands. Of course, Bitcoin's price swings a lot. So as we've seen quite recently, you could easily buy Bitcoin for, I don't know, 15 or 20K and then sell it for around 30K, making either 100% or at least 50% profit. But it depends what you want to do, what kind of trader or investor you want to be. Do you want to trade those short-term movements, or would you rather buy when the prices are known to be low if you look at the long time frame, and then sell when they are high, again, looking at the long time frame? This tool doesn't really work if you want to do short-term trading because it doesn't give you much information about those short-term swings. As you can see, all the prices between sort of 15 and 30K are still within this greenish blue band. If you look at the long term, they are all still just buy and hold category rather than trading, even though the actual percentage movement is really high. But if you're looking at longer term, so for example, trying to predict the next crypto bull run and the market cycle peak, that's the kind of tool that can help you a lot. So what can we expect to happen in the next crypto bull run? Of course, this is all just speculation, but well, so far this is the best tool we can use to predict those prices. So basically you can either go by what someone says, that Bitcoin will hit, I don't know, 100K, 300K, 500K, whatever, or you can use tools like this one and then basically make the decision for yourself. Because the problem is that if someone tells you what price Bitcoin will hit and at what price you should sell, well, they're saying this based on their financial situation. If they were buying Bitcoin at, I don't know, let's say $3,000, well, of course they are massively in profit, even during this huge crash here, right? So for them, there's really no such thing as a bad time to sell Bitcoin. But if you're buying it at much higher prices, let's say you bought it somewhere here at 50K, well, your position is very, very different. Also depends how much Bitcoin you're holding and so on, what's your strategy, etc. So you should definitely know those tools to be able to make the decisions for yourself. So what can we expect to happen in the next crypto bull run? That's our question number one. And question number two, well, when Bitcoin may hit $1 million, just because it's a nice round number, and yeah, let's see when, if at all, it's possible. So first of all, next crypto bull run. We know that the next halving will take place somewhere here. So that's around March, April next year. This date can move a little bit. It's not fixed, but it will be around March, April next year. 2024. Looking at previous market cycles, it's also fair to assume that the market will probably peak somewhere between 12 to 18 months after the halving. Of course, it doesn't mean that Bitcoin will be just simply going up gradually throughout that period. If we look at the last market cycle, we had quite a long period of just bumpy sideways movement, then a very, very rapid move up, slight dip, then move up, and we were firmly in this red band in sort of April 2021. Then we had big crash over the summer, but then actually market cycle peak was in November. Barely, it was only a little bit higher than the one in the spring, but actually that was the market cycle peak. Nonetheless, you could make an awful lot of money on this move here, cash out here, and just leave it. In the previous market cycle, it was actually a relatively steady move up. I mean, there were some big pullbacks, of course, but it was, broadly speaking, just a gradual move up. But in the one before that, we had very, very rapid move up, then a big crash, bit of sideways movement, and then another massive move up. So we don't know what will happen in the next cycle. We may have, again, those two peaks. We may have three peaks, or it may just gradually go up over this period of 12 to 18 months. But it would be reasonably safe to assume that the peak will be about 12 to 18 months after the halving, which would put it somewhere in the second half of 2025. So I would say that the market will peak somewhere between, let's call it June 2025 and very early 2026. So basically somewhere here. So what we can expect to happen is a bit of sideways movement for the next few months until the halving, possibly a bit of a pullback after the halving or just before, and then a slow move up, maybe with some bigger peaks, something like this, and then gradually coming down. Well, it's not perfect, but I think it's a reasonably good approximation. Move more or less like this. Of course, timings can change. The amplitude may change quite a bit, but one assumption I'm working with is that Bitcoin will not go above this orange band. So while in the previous bull markets, it was reasonable to expect it to go into red one or dark red, I think that in this bull market, in the upcoming bull market, it will only reach this dark orange, potentially even light orange band, like top of the light orange one. And then once it crashes afterwards, I would expect it will stay in this green one, maybe only very briefly touching the greenish blue band. But we're not getting into that bear market just yet. So what we can expect price-wise? Well, if we, let's say, pick this point right here, that would be March 2025. So almost a year after the halving, or about a year after the halving. This dark orange band now sits at anything between $155,000 and $200,000. Light orange is 120 to 155. If we then say that the peak will be later, late 2025 or early 2026, for example, here we have a date in late September 2025, which I think it's a pretty reasonable, roughly, date for the market cycle peak. We can see that the light orange band is between 142 to 181,000, and then the dark orange one is 181 to 233,000. So these are roughly the prices which, using this tool, are reasonable as the next market cycle peak. Basically something from around, I would say, 120,000 to 200,000, potentially even closer to 250, especially if the market will peak in early 2026. Of course, it's a huge range, and the later the market peaks, the higher the price is likely to go, because these bands keep going up, and they keep going out quite rapidly. So even if we stayed in the light orange band, well, if that happens at a later point in the future, this band will be much, much higher, right? So it's a huge range, and of course, it's also quite a large range of potential dates when the market cycle may peak, but at least it gives us some very rough idea of what's realistic. So if someone says that Bitcoin's price will reach 300,000 or 400,000 in the next crypto bull run. Personally, I think that's a bit too optimistic. It's not impossible, because if, let's say, again, we go with this price or this date here, somewhere in March 2025, well, actually, the light red band peaks around 300,000. If we go into early 2026, the light red band peaks around 330,000, 336. And of course, it's not impossible that we'll reach, or maybe even just barely touch that band. So in theory, yeah, 300,000 may be possible, but personally, I would think it's quite unlikely. In my opinion, depending how the market, how the price of Bitcoin will behave, how quickly it will be going up, I think something between, like I said earlier, 120,000 to about 200,000, that's realistic. Anything above that is not impossible, but it's pushing it a little bit. What's also really important is looking at how the price behaves within those bands. So as you can see here, when in the last market cycle, we had this massive move from late 2020 to April 2021, that pushed us deep into the red band, almost touching the dark red one. When you see something like this rapid move through multiple bands and into the orange ones or even red ones, that's most definitely a good time to sell. There may be another peak, but that's never guaranteed. So if you see any kind of movement that takes you into those orange bands, that's basically when you should be thinking about selling. And that will be my strategy in this next crypto bull market. If the price keeps sort of slowly going up, the actual price may be quite high, but it may still stay, for example, in this yellow territory, right? So what would be a peak of the yellow band, let's say here in late 2024, so about 100,000, maybe barely bottom of, maybe actually in the green band below Bitcoin's fair value in late 2025. So it's important to see where we are within those bands, and rather than just simply what the price of Bitcoin is at any given point in time. That's why I think this tool is so valuable, because it helps you assess what's actually happening, whether the price is hitting up too much and it's likely that we'll have a pullback, or whether we are still in this sort of safe territory right here. The second question I asked is when it's likely that Bitcoin may hit $1 million. Of course, this is much more difficult to predict because of the price, because of how much it will have to go up in value. This is going to be much further into the future. We can try to predict the next crypto bull run reasonably well, but $1 million, I mean, that's at least 2 or 3 market cycles from now. And of course, a lot can happen in that time. So first thing we need to do is increase this scale all the way up to 2035, or actually the scale will give us values all the way to 2037. And then we just look at which point the price may hit $1 million. So in that dark red band, as you can see, in theory, we could hit at the top of the red band $1 million in April 2029. But this is after the next market cycle, and personally, I don't think, or I think it's extremely unlikely that we'll ever hit that dark red band or top of that dark red band. So I would say we're looking at the value somewhere in the orange band, light orange, as being a bit more realistic, which would be somewhere in 2032. And that's actually something I heard a couple of times in the past, that Bitcoin is likely to hit around $1 million around 2030. So still good 7 years from now, but in theory, that's when it may be possible. Certainly not in the next market cycle. I wouldn't expect it to be in the market cycle after that, maybe at the very end of it, potentially. But yeah, that's more or less what we can expect. Of course, once again, the issue with tools like this is that they work great until they don't. And that's simply because all those models assume that things will happen in a predictable, reasonable way. Something happened in the past, and therefore we can assume that following the same logic, certain things will happen in the future, which is great. But the problem is that the price of any asset is not following a model, is basically, it just depends on people's actions, and people are anything but reasonable and rational. So what the price will actually do, well, it will just simply depend on people. For example, I expect that the price of Bitcoin may hit that 120K or even more in the next crypto bull run, but also I expect that there is going to be a significant sell-off around 70K, basically once we hit the previous all-time high, purely because that will be the point when everyone will be again back in profit. Even if someone bought at the top of the previous market cycle, there will be again at least breaking even, maybe not necessarily making profit, but at least breaking even. And I'm sure there will be plenty of people who are just waiting for it because they just want to get their money back and never again touch crypto because they got burnt in the last crypto bull run and they just want to be out and essentially not lose money. That's their only goal. Then again, once we hit 100K, it's a huge, huge psychological level. So of course there will be a sell-off around 100K level. I think once we break above it, then up to 150 or 200K, a lot can happen, right? There are no longer those very clear levels. I mean, of course, there are like 110,000, 120,000 and so on, but they are far less important than hitting the previous all-time high and then hitting 100K level. So there are a lot of things that can mess up this model, but all we can do is basically just look at it once the price of Bitcoin starts going back up and see where we are and then adjust accordingly. That's pretty much it from me for today. I hope this is helpful. I will put the link to this tool in the description. I think that if you are serious about investing in Bitcoin or crypto of any kind, you absolutely must use this tool so you can basically see where the price of Bitcoin is, what's happening, and based on this chart, you should largely make your other movements in this space. Because let's be honest, if Bitcoin is in those blue or green bands, we're not going to have any meaningful altcoin season. I mean, there may be a bit of a bump, but nothing to get excited about. And then again, if we are in those orange or red bands, well, you should be selling Bitcoin and if anything, rolling those profits into altcoins. Because what crypto market did in the past was Bitcoin would go up, then Ethereum, then altcoins. So this is the moment when you are in those bands to roll your profits. But that's something for a separate video. I'll be talking about this much more in the future. Again, I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye.